Welcome everybody on this happy World Sea Turtle Day. June 16th is World Sea Turtle Day annually, and my name is Mark Swingle. I'm with the Virginia Aquarium, and I'm also the program leader for the AZA's, that's the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, Sea Turtle SAFE program. And SAFE is an acronym for Saving Animals from Extinction. So we're really excited to have you here today for this live webinar broadcast on World Sea Turtle Day. And we're really fortunate to have two wonderful speakers with us today. And I'm going to introduce them now, and then they'll go into their presentations, and then we'll have some time for questions afterwards. So first, I want to introduce Clara Ortiz Alvarez. Clara studied biology at the Universidad Peruana Cayetano Heredia, and I'm sure I butchered that. And she earned a master's degree in marine biology and ecology at James Cook University in Australia. She's currently working as a project manager in the Peruvian NGO Pro Delfinus, where her work is focused on the conservation of marine fauna and sustainable fisheries. Clara is a member of the IUCN's Otter Specialist Group and the LAUDOPO, which is the Eastern Pacific Leatherback Network, and professor of conservation biology at the Universidad Científica del Sur in Peru. Our second speaker is Roderic Mast. Rod is Oceanic Society's president and CEO. He's a lifelong conservationist, a marine biologist, and an experienced travel guide who got his start as a naturalist in the Galapagos Islands. Rod is the co-chair of the IUCN SSC Marine Turtle Specialist Group and the co-founder of the State of the World Sea Turtles, or SWOT program, which is associated with the Oceanic Society. So welcome, both of you. We're really excited to have you today, and I think we're going to kick it off with Rod Mast.
I'll share my screen. Can everybody see it? Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Mark and Kelly. I'm glad you're here. Appreciate the invitation. Clara, it's a pleasure to see you. And thanks to the AZA SAFE program that's been supporting, through SWOT, work to conserve both the Eastern Pacific leatherback and also the Kemp's ridley throughout its range, both of which are critically endangered populations of sea turtles. We're very grateful to the AZA SAFE for that. Thanks to all my colleagues at Oceanic Society, where I work. Thanks to all my community at the IUCN Marine Turtle Specialist Group, and especially thanks to the State of the World Sea Turtles, or SWOT team. We're very happy to also be launching our 17th SWOT report today. So I encourage you all to go online and check that out. Just for context, my trajectory as a turtle guy started back when I was a kid in Iowa catching freshwater turtles. And at some point, I took a trip to Florida Keys and saw a sea turtle, and then I was hooked for life. Ended up studying biology in college, and then right after college ended up working on sea turtles in the field, first in Georgia with loggerheads, then in the Galapagos with greens, and ultimately at the nesting site, the main nesting site of the Kemp's ridley sea turtle in Tamaulipas, Mexico, where you see me here in 1981, before losing that mop of hair and becoming what you see here today. I want to explain to you, to begin, why sea turtles are so amazing. There are so many reasons, but this is one of my favorite animals to help tell that story. It's the leatherback. It's truly the closest thing to a dinosaur that's left on Earth. It's the most widely ranging, fastest growing, heaviest reptile on Earth. It's the biggest turtle, outweighs even Galapagos tortoises. And it eats almost exclusively jellyfish and creatures like this pyrosome, which are mostly water. So as you can imagine, it has to eat tons and tons of this stuff to achieve the size. And they act kind of like mammals in some ways. They're what we call facultative homeotherms. So they can shut off that part of the reptile that doesn't allow them to go into cold water, and they travel all the way up into the Arctic. I don't know where this photo was taken, but I've seen animals this size feeding on jellyfish way up by Halifax, Canada. They're big. As I mentioned, this is the largest not quite the largest reptile extant today. It's outweighed by the saltwater crocodile of the found in northern Australia and New Guinea. But it's pretty close, and it's definitely, as I said, the biggest of all the turtles. This one right in this photo, taken on a beach called Grand Riviera in Trinidad a couple of years ago, is probably a medium size one, say 800 pounds, but they get up to a ton. And this one has a wingspan of, I don't know, probably 12 feet, and a stem to stern is probably 5 feet. Another thing to keep in mind is that these animals are really ancient. They've been plying the seas for more than 100 million years. Archelon that you see here was one of the biggest of the recently extinct turtles. This is about 100 million years ago, I believe. It's a 3-ton animal with a 16-foot wingspan. But physiologically, it's not all that different from a leatherback of today. And in fact, several of the world's sea turtles survived the asteroid that took out 85% of life on Earth about 65 million years ago. And they've not changed much since. Also, they have remarkable natural histories. This is a hawksbill. It eats almost exclusively sponges. There's very few things in the ocean that eat sponges because they're toxic and full of all sorts of piercing glass spicules. Yet that's what these guys prefer over everything else, is sponges. And all sea turtles have fairly long generation times, ranging from 11 or 12 years in Kemp's ridleys all the way up to maybe 30 years or more in Pacific greens. And that makes them a challenge to conserve because they have to survive from hatchling all the way up to sometimes 30 years before they even start reproducing the next generation. They all, to our knowledge, have the ability to return to their natal shores. This is something that's been demonstrated, a skill that they have of sort of an internal GPS that uses magnetism, not unlike birds, something that's been discovered and written a great deal about by the Lohman Lab in Charleston, South Carolina. And they have this thing called temperature-dependent sex determination, where the baby turtles are male or female, not based on an XY chromosome like humans, but based on the temperature at which the eggs were incubated. So a pivotal temperature, say for example 30 degrees centigrade, could result in a nest that's 50-50 males and females, but just a couple degrees higher and they're all females, and a couple degrees lower and they're all males. So all these things have implications for how we conserve the animals. They have these phenomenal behaviors. This is the nesting behavior of the olive ridley. It's called the arribada, which is Spanish for arrival. Basically, they all wait offshore, and then when they get the right cue, and we don't know exactly what that is, they all come ashore and nest in waves, and these waves might last 5 days, and they're digging up the eggs of one another, and the hatchling success is really low, but what it is a strategy of predator glut. No predator can eat all those adults, eat all those eggs, or eat all those hatchlings that come out after. So it's just sort of a brilliant reproductive strategy that this one species, actually two, because the Kemp's does it as well, has adapted to be able to survive. Here's another amazing thing they do, just epic migrations. This is a famous track, a research done by the folks at NOAA in La Jolla. They've been tagging nesting females in the Bird's Head Peninsula, Papua New Guinea, West Papua, Indonesia, for many years, and they've tracked bunches of them now, all the way back to the US Pacific coast, where they come for jellyfish. And there's a whole bunch of other mysteries that make sea turtles interesting, things that we haven't been able to completely figure out yet. There's a phenomena called the lost year. This was a phrase that was coined by a guy named Archie Carr back in the 60s to describe that period of time from when they scurry down the beach as hatchlings until they're seen again as sort of dinner plate sized turtles. we kind of know what's going on. Science has told us, answered a lot of the questions for example, the loggerheads that nest in Florida, but there's still some species, some populations of turtles for which we really don't know what's happening in their lost years. We also don't know sort of basic things about biology, simply because these are animals that are widespread out in the oceans. Natural population levels. When we're starting as conservationists, we often focus on recovery. The question is then recovery to what? What ought their natural population levels be? What are natural sex ratios? These are all questions that remain to be answered well by sea turtle scientists. And most importantly, can these animals survive in a modern world where they're faced with many, many threats? We know that, and this is a figure that gets tossed around a lot, that approximately 1 in 1,000 eggs actually becomes an adult. And this is just based on natural predation. There's a lot of things that eat eggs. There's a lot of things that eat babies. They face a lot of threats in the ocean until the time they get big. But that's a lot to deal with if you're a turtle. But on top of that, we know that millions of these animals die every year at the hands of modern humans. And if we look carefully at the threats, we can reduce them basically to 5 things. Fisheries bycatch, meaning animals that get caught in fisheries nets that aren't targeted. People aren't out there, fishermen are out there to catch fish, not to catch turtles, but in the process of catching fish, no matter what kind of, whether it's long lines or trawls or purse seines or gill nets, they end up catching and killing a lot of turtles. Coastal development, as you know, the animals have to come out on the shore to nest. If there's no reasonable shore, if there's too much light, if there's a hotel there, makes it difficult for them and the hatchlings if they actually do manage to nest. Something shocking, like 80% of the beachfront of the state of Florida is armored in one way or another, and not as usable as it once was pre-human for sea turtles. Hunting and egg take, this kind of direct take has a different impact on different species. Some species are targeted for food, like the green. Some are targeted for their shell, like the hawksbill. Some are targeted for eggs, like the olive ridley. And then pollution, of course. We hear a lot about the obvious stuff, the plastic, and maybe even the light pollution. But there's also chemical pollution that can have lethal or even sublethal impacts on turtles. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then, of course, climate change. As the planet warms, I mentioned before, temperature-dependent sex determination. What kind of an impact is that going to have on turtles? As the seas warm up, this is a reptile. They have to worry about thermal regulation. Lots of concerns to think about with sea turtles. And as a result of all these threats, we find that according to the IUCN, 6 of the 7 sea turtle species reside in the threatened categories. So I wanted to give you a quick lesson on, we call this Meet the Turtles. I like everybody to walk away with an understanding of the fact that there are 7 and what they all are. This is pretty easy. To be a sea turtle man or woman, it's not like being a whale expert where you got to memorize 90 names, or even a freshwater turtle person. There's about 350 of those, 1,000 sharks, 18,000 birds. So 7 turtles is not tough. So these will all be on the quiz afterwards. The flatback in the upper left there, I talked about the Kemps. That's the smallest. The green moving across the top, that's the one of the larger ones, one of the larger hardback turtles. Olive ridley in the upper right there, loggerhead, which many Americans are familiar with because it nests predominantly on coast of Florida and Georgia. Hawksbill, and then the big boy there on the far right, the non-hard-shelled separate family, the leatherback. It does get a little more complicated than just 7 species. When we start to dig into the differences within species, we find that there are subpopulations. This is just a picture a poster that we made a number of years ago. We asked everybody in the SWOT community, and I believe in the Marine Turtle Specialist Group community, if they would send us a picture of what green turtles look like where they lived. And as you can see, there's a great variety of sizes, shapes, and especially colors of green turtles from around the world, and yet they're all one species, Chelonia mitis. So back in 2003, I was asked to serve as the president of the International Sea Turtle Society for a year, and also asked to serve as the co-chairman of the Marine Turtle Specialist Group of the IUCN, a job which I've had since then. And I told the organization that I worked for at the time that if we were going to take this seriously, I had to create a much more comprehensive effort for understanding what's going on with turtles worldwide. This was at the beginning, the advent of satellite tracking. There was some of that going on, but very little. It was very expensive at the time. But it was also the advent of data sharing, and internet communication was getting more popular, and relational databases. So we teamed up with Duke University and their Marine Geospatial Ecology Lab to create a global scale database that we called SWOT. It's an acronym for the State of the World Sea Turtles. And before you complain about my acronym, because everybody complains about this, I tell them there's kind of two reasons that we settled on SWOT. Number one, it's a much better acronym than so what. And number two, it allows me to call all the people that are involved in this effort the SWOT team. And in short, it's basically a global network to accelerate the conservation of sea turtles and their habitats. So what's the first thing we did? We thought we create this database. We need to fill the database with all the information we can so we can start to see on a global scale what's happening with sea turtles. So here you see the data as of 2004, basically nothing. And a couple of years ago, we filled every major ocean basin, every species, beach nesting data, telemetry data. We know more about sea turtles on a global scale now than we ever did in past history, even 10 years ago. And this is nothing actually. This is 2020. I haven't updated the graphics since then, but we did a map last year that we published in SWOT Report Volume 16 that had more than 700 beaches where ridley nesting occurs. And we just finished a map, which we published this morning. I'll talk a little bit about that later on, of hawksbills that had something like 1,700 data points. So as you can see, we've got a robust data set that can now help us guide global scale conservation. And here's some of the stuff we did with it. First of all, maps. We decided way back in the early days, let's make a map of leatherback sea turtle distribution. So we did. And then we moved on to loggerheads, and then we moved on to hawksbills, and then we moved on to flatbacks and both of the ridleys and greens. Little by little, we were able to create the first comprehensive global nesting maps of all 7 species. But nesting is just the tiniest fraction of a female turtle's life. It's very important information for doing conservation, but if we really want to know what's happening with sea turtles, we got to know what they're doing in the sea, because there's sea turtles, not beach turtles. And so in 2011, we added another component where we started looking at telemetry data. We had very gracious donations of data from people around the world that were working on this, and we were able to look at some of these things like in the upper left there, that's loggerhead migrations in the Pacific. And then ultimately we did global loggerhead sea turtle satellite telemetry. We did telemetry from major continents, as you see on the right there. Basically, this is what really rounded out our data set to be able to know what's going on with turtles globally. Now, once we had that information, we were able to sit down with experts from the Marine Turtle Specialist Group and others and say, hey, are we really looking at one species worldwide here from a conservation perspective, or are we looking at more? And we all knew we were looking at more, but we didn't really have the data to be able to refine a map like this, which is regional management units or subpopulations of the leatherback. And this really was a big step forward in conservation, because as a conservationist, it's not particularly helpful for me to know that the leatherback is critically endangered globally. Because where do I put my money? Where do I put my effort to conserve it? There's just too many choices. But now we can look at regional management units, and what we've discovered is that the Eastern Pacific leatherback, for instance, is much worse off than the one in the Atlantic or in the Southwest Indian Ocean. It's a very useful tool for getting conservation done. Not only that, since this lives in a big database with a bunch of data about other ocean biogeographic stuff, we can overlay it with information about fisheries. So now we know we're able to do assessments that help us understand if we want to address the impact of fisheries threats on sea turtles. Now we can help determine what the hotspots are, and you can see some of those red to green there, highest to lowest. And we've been able to do the same thing with climate change, adaptability, and things of that nature, such that we're now able to produce global scale priorities maps. That this is just for the green turtle. We've got these for all 7 species at this point, showing where the investment is most needed. So you see there, that category red for the green turtle is the now or never category. That's the place where we have to urgently invest money to assure that we avoid extinctions. Whereas the green areas are, sure, they're important, but what they need right now is just continued monitoring. So we produced the data with the help of a global community. We then synthesized it into maps that we gave back to the global community, saying, here's where you can focus your priority conservation work. The community came back to us and said, yeah, but we need some money. And we don't need a lot of money. We just need a little bit of money to do a workshop here, or a campaign there, or to buy some equipment for research there. So we started something called the SWOT, Small Grants Program. And we've now given away, nearly, I think with this year's grants, we'll be up to close to 150 grants in something like 55 countries. So that has turned out to be actually one of the most gratifying aspects of SWOT, is to see what a small community in Sierra Leone can do with $1,000 to bring together a workshop of the local policemen, because they're the ones that have to enforce the sea turtle laws, but didn't know anything about it, and educate the local policemen. Something like that is super valuable, and as I say, based on my involvement with SWOT, it's a very gratifying aspect of the work as well. In recent years, we teamed up with Disney Conservation and others to create something called Team Beach, which is an acronym for Be a Change Maker. The idea is that there are many projects, and by many I mean hundreds, working on beaches and in capital cities, actually all over the world, trying to reach out to people locally with regard to sea turtle conservation. And all these have one thing in common, and that is they're trying to change people's behavior, whether it's behavior around lights on the beach, or behavior around plastic use, or carbon footprint, or pollution. They have a lot in common. So social science, as it relates to behavior change, has evolved enormously in the last 20 years. So social scientists with Disney and others have teamed up with us, and we're building this community to bring projects together worldwide, to share lessons, to see what works, to start measuring things. to see how we use sea turtles to actually result in human behavior change that's good for the ocean. Now, one of the things that comes out of these priority setting exercises is the understanding, as I mentioned before, that certain things like the Eastern Pacific leatherback are critically endangered. We know that they've experienced a drop off in the last 20 years that really has them teetering at the edge of extinction. The Kemp's ridley is another one. That is our next presentation. I won't step on Clara's toes as she's going to be talking about that. But I did want to take a moment to announce that SWOT report volume 17 has been published today online. Go check it out at seaturtlestatus.org. And just a couple of words about the magazine. It's not a scientific paper. It's not a journal. It's a magazine. It's designed to be beautiful, to be readable, to be solutions oriented for everyone in the sea turtle community, not just academics, but people who live and work on beaches around the world. It's designed to be super accessible, and it's free. We do a print volume, and we will, but right now, because of COVID, we've put a lot more attention on the online version, and I encourage you all to go check it out. And if you really want a hard copy, just send me an email, and I'll be happy to pop one in the mail to you. And then lastly, happy World Sea Turtle Day, everybody. Thanks for being here, and thanks for listening. And now I'll pass it on to Clara to tell us a little bit about Eastern Pacific leatherbacks and the work that they're doing with Pro Delfinas in Peru.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Rod. I don't know if everyone can see my presentation. If it's okay, cool. Thank you, Mark. Okay, thank you, Rod, for passing me through. And thank you, Mark, Kelly, and Rod for having this opportunity to share a little bit about our work in Pro Delfinos here in Peru. So I'm going to talk about the Eastern Pacific population of leatherbacks and the work we're doing here. So as already Mark mentioned, I am Peruvian. I am part of this NGO, Pro Delfinos, which is, we have a lot of people working together. And yeah, I don't have as much experience on working with sea turtle as Rod, but I also started when I was in my bachelor as a volunteer in Pro Delfinos. And later in my master's, I got to meet a lot of cool people working with sea turtles too. And then back here in Peru, again with Pro Delfinos. But yeah, our work is mainly focused on the conservation of marine megafauna and also in the promotion of sustainable fisheries, because Peru is fisheries is a very important economic activity. So, and one of the groups that we work with is the sea turtles. We have 5 of the 7 species. 4 of them are these hard-shell turtles, like the green turtle we see here. But we also have leatherbacks, particularly those that come from the Eastern Pacific population. And you can see here down that they can be known with different common names depending on where you are. Here in Peru, we usually call them as Galapagos, but in other countries, they can be called as baula, laúd, siete quillas. So they have different common names depending on the country you are. So as Rod previously mentioned, this subpopulation of leatherbacks has kind of a large distribution. It can be found from Mexico down to Chile. And here in Mexico and Costa Rica and some other countries here, we can find their nesting beaches where the large females go to lay their eggs. And after that, many of the individual hatchling, while they are growing, or the females come to South America to forage mainly. The ocean or the coasting from Peru, Ecuador, and Chile are known as foraging areas. And probably this is where they spend most of these lost years during their life. So as you know now, this Eastern Pacific population is considered as critically endangered. And as you can see in this graph now, here we have the number of females that go nest in these nesting beaches every year. And we can see here like a trend of decreasing along the years. So there has been reported like about a 90% decline since the 80s. So that is why one of the reasons of this Eastern Pacific population is going to extinction. No? And that is what we want to prevent. So to understand, and already Rod mentioned, there are several threats. So leatherbacks inhabit in the sea. They spend a lot of their life there. But also in the sea, we have several activities like fishing activities. And particularly in Peru, Chile, and Ecuador, fishing activities are a very important component of our lives. A lot of people depend on these activities, not only fishers, but other members of this value chain, complicated value chain behind fishery. So what happens? Well, at some point, leatherbacks and fishing vessels are going to meet in the sea, and that is going to produce something or interactions between leatherbacks, but also marine mammals or seabirds and fisheries. And so when they interact, these events are usually called bycatch, and that is when could be a leatherback is caught into the nets or is caught by the hook accidentally while fishing activities are taking place. And bycatch is one of the causes of the decline of this population. So but what we can do to prevent this event to happen, and then is when we started to think about solutions. And then we think about to use our five senses. What do we can use? So the sight is one we can use, and that is what we try to do using these lights, LED lights. We put them in the fishing nets. Actually, fishers put them in the fishing nets, and it produces like an illumination. So it's net light illumination as a bycatch mitigation technology. So it helps the nets to get illuminated so the sea turtles can see the nets and can avoid the net. And in that way, we can prevent these interactions. So, and we have seen that these lights are very useful and reduce bycatch of sea turtles in 60%, more or less, and also are very useful to prevent bycatch of other marine megafauna like dolphins and seabirds. So this tool has been very effective in reducing bycatch. But what else we are doing here in Peru? We are always working with our allies, which are the fishers. How we do that? So through workshops, we are always running very frequently workshops with fishers, trying to talk about bycatch, trying to talk about how we can prevent these events, or how to use certain tools to disentangle sea turtles. And we are always running these workshops on good practices to safe handling and release sea turtles, because these events are going to happen at any point during their fishing activities. So it's better to have very well-trained fishers so they actually know the proper way to release turtles, so we can increase the chances of survival for these animals later. And we run workshops, we prepare material like infographics, very simple, so where we summarize the information they actually need. We have prepared videos so they can watch us, like demonstrating how release animals, and also like guides focus on certain fisheries. For instance, this one is focused on purseine fisheries, which is a very important fishery here, particularly the industrial fisheries that targets anchovy. So there's a big effort to try to train these fishers so they can learn how to release and handle sea turtles properly. In addition, as Rod also mentioned, there are other threats: contamination, pollution, and we are also trying to improve their fishing practices by, for example, talking to them about how to appropriately manage solid waste, not throwing it into the sea, because that's a common practice sometimes. So we are training them to keep their solid waste on board and bring it to land to have an appropriate management. So that is something we are still working on, trying to educate people, because sometimes they actually don't know what's the impact of these actions to the environment, to the sea turtles, and at the end into their activities, because they depend on fishing activities. So in addition, as we all know now, these animals have a regional distribution, therefore they have regional threats. So we need a regional collaboration. That's when appears Laudopo Network, which gather more than 70 members from government agencies, academia, conservation NGOs, from Chile to United States. And one of the key activities is working with fishermen to assess and reduce turtle bycatch, for instance, with Chile and from Chile to Mexico. So here you have like a bunch of pictures with the logos of several institutions that are part of this Laudopo network. And as I mentioned, we have been able to work with fishing communities across the regions to share experiences among them. And one of the results we got of this collaborative work is to have a regional baseline of sea turtles interactions. So we now know where is bycatch occurring from Mexico to Chile. And this has been possible to be produced because of the collaboration among several people, scientists, organizations. Also, as we know, the population of the Eastern Pacific have been declining. And thanks to this collaboration also, we have been able to have some future conservation scenarios. They're represented here by these lines in here. And we can see that those lines that go up, like those marked with the green star, are providing us some guidelines of what we can do so we can prevent Eastern Pacific population of leatherback Eastern Pacific population go extinct. So some of these scenarios told us that we need to keep working on protecting nesting beaches and reducing adults' mortality into 20%, so we can save these animals from extinction. So this is some of the result of working as a network in collaboration. We have better guidelines. We know where to put our efforts to prevent these animals to go extinct. Also, as I mentioned, we have been able to create regional exchange. For instance, Peruvian fishers visited Mexico and they met these huge animals in their nesting areas. They share experiences among fishers from that area. And then when Peruvian fishers here, we have Pedro, which is one of the fishers that work with us for several years. He came here and was able to exchange their experiences. So that was very, very nice and a very good opportunity for them to know what they are actually protecting, and we have them more involved and more aware of the importance of protecting these animals. And here, just to finish, I really like this slide from Brian Wallace, who kindly shared the presentation with me, this slide. So towards regional collaboration. So what we require for regional collaboration, communication among colleagues and relevant entities to share information and experiences that help to build something like SWOT that Rod mentioned before. We need respect because we come from different countries, different backgrounds. So that is a very important component. Then solidarity among partners, wherever we are, wherever they are. And these all bring us to have an holistic perspective and actions, and we can focus better our conservation efforts. So thank you very much for your time and for listening. Here, well, we have the links for the webpage of Prodolphinus and Laudopo that you can visit and learn a little bit more about the work we do as a Peruvian NGO and also as a network. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
All right. Well, Clara, thank you so much for that information about fisheries and sea turtles in Peru. And Rod, of course, thank you so much for your presentation. I have not been paying close attention to the chat. Were there any questions in the chat?
I have not seen any questions come in, but we would love to have your questions, folks. If you, looks like something just came in from Shiling. Hello, thank you for the great presentations. I see both organizations have been doing very good work with local fishermen, but in regards to industrial fisheries impacts, are there any campaigns or measures being developed or implemented to limit its impacts?
Clara, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, actually, Laudopo Network work very closely with SWOT. We provide them with some information. They provide us with some information. So we are always like sharing information and trying to learn more about these interactions and how to prevent them. And also here in Peru, with the industrial fisheries, which is very important for us and large, we are always working together in this, for instance, safe handling and release turtles. Now they are becoming more part of the protocols they have to follow. They are developing also guides and applications so they can record more efficiently where these events are happening. And actually the industry is getting very involved in trying to prevent and to do a good work when it comes to release these animals. So they yeah, with the time here in Peru at least, it's getting more important too.
Yeah, I would just add to that bycatch is a major issue for most fisheries, with the exception of the illegal and unregulated ones. And within I mean, for instance, if you go to the annual Sea Turtle Symposium, which hasn't actually happened for a few years, but there's always a big section on fisheries related policy work that's happening at all scales. Some MTSG members from the Guianas, for instance, are working both at the local scale, at the regional scale, and also trying to influence, for instance, the folks from French Guiana are trying to influence the European Union's seafood purchasing protocols through the French government. So there is work happening at all scales, but it remains the number one most severe threat. More turtles are killed by as bycatch every year than pretty much any other threat that we know of. So even though things are happening, it's probably not happening enough or fast enough.
I have a question related to that, and then there are a couple of other questions in the Q&A and chat. Are the fish or seafood caught in these fisheries in the Eastern Pacific leatherback home range, or really, I guess, all of these Central and South American countries, are those largely feeding those range countries? Are they shipped around the world? Are we getting that seafood in America and other parts of the world?
Yeah, well, actually, small-scale fisheries here in Peru are important because they fed most of the population in Peru. Part of it might be exported, but it's a really important source of food for us. So yeah, we usually eat most of the fish they caught in in small scale fisheries. Then in industrial fisheries, which is mainly anchovy, is destined to produce flour, fish flour for other products. So, but yeah, it's too soon to say, but leatherback are not kind of frequently caught in industrial, but maybe because the monitoring is not being that intensive. So.
Well, the other thing is that there's hardly any of them left to catch in the Eastern Pacific.
Also.
So, yeah, I've heard that argument. Oh, well, we hardly catch any.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because over the last 20 years, you caught so many that there's hardly any left.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a famous quote from a fisherman in Mexico when questioned about bycatch, and he said, "Well, how can these animals be endangered? I kill dozens every time I go fishing." And yeah, it is a problem in almost all kinds of fisheries out there. I see a question here. What are the 1 or 2 things consumers can look at when purchasing fish to support fishers who are taking on best practices to avoid bycatch? And I want to direct you to another website. Oceanic Society has a program called Blue Habits that's focused on all the things that humans do and can do at all scales to make a healthier ocean. And part of that is appropriate seafood choices. So go check out bluehabits.org or the Blue Habits portion of the Oceanic Society website, which will also direct you there. And you can join a community of other people that are already dedicated to this, and we welcome you.
I see a couple of questions, Kelly. One is one person asked about the illuminated net mitigation measures and if those measures had caused any impact to the targeted fish species catch.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And that's the question we have the fishers ask us. And yeah, no, that's why I think they really want to use it, because lead lights that not affect their target catch. And that's one of the points we assess when we are testing the lights, that we are not affecting the target catch. Because if they see that they caught less fishes, so they are not going to use it. So yeah, but it's good that they do not affect target catch.
That's great. So that's been a success story, an initial success story, at least in one of the mitigation measures. So that's been exciting.
Yeah.
And there's a question in there about the approximate population of the East Pacific leatherbacks. And I know, Clara, you shared a slide that just showed the decline. And I know I've seen that slide from Dr. Brian Wallace also. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but that, of course, that's just looking at nesting. That's just looking at nesting numbers, which is where we probably have the best numbers, is from the nesting beaches.
There's a section of SWOT report called Frequently Asked Questions. And if you go back to SWOT report volume 15, in the frequently asked questions section about sea turtles, there's an article actually written by Dr. Brian Wallace on page 14 that provides global estimates, and they're pretty broad estimates of the numbers of different species of the 7 different species, but it doesn't get down into the population scale. I'm sure we could do that, and there are probably, someone's bound to have some numbers estimated at least for Eastern Pacific, but I don't know those off the top of my head.
Yeah, me neither. Like numbers exact, no.
I see a question in the chat section from a friend of mine, Barbara, in West Palm, who asked about leatherbacks that nest on the beach in her front yard, and where do they go when they're not nesting? Most of the North Atlantic and Caribbean leatherbacks go up to Canada to feed, off of in and around Nova Scotia and those cold waters up there where they get those big giant lion's mane jellyfish. They love those.
Are there still issues with the consumption of leatherback and other sea turtle eggs in Central and South America and Mexico as well?
With consumption?
Of eggs?
There is illegal consumption of sea turtle eggs, you know, at different levels depending on where you are, whether they enforce it or not, but all, you know, from Mexico down to Ecuador, you'll find some of that going on. Some places, Costa Rica, there's actually a legal harvest, but only of olive ridley eggs,
right.
Not leatherback. But it's difficult to control the industry because some of it's legal, and I've heard stories of eggs of different species and those harvested outside the realm of the legal project, eggs from other species leaking into the industry. So it's I don't think it's as bad a threat as it used to be, particularly in Mexico, which used to be pretty
in
bad.
Peru, we have not we don't have too many, like we have some nesting areas for green turtles and olive ridleys, but egg consumption I think has not been reported. But animals like turtles, we probably have still some issues with that in some small communities. So it's probably an issue, but not too much. We haven't looked too much at it in the last years, but yeah, probably it's still occurring. Not leatherbacks, I think, more hard-shell turtles.
Right, and there are nest protection programs happening in these range countries. So that's part of it, right? That these nesting grounds are in many cases protected by conservation groups or locals.
Yes, there's a surprising number of small scale conservation projects. Some of them are under in most places they require permitting from the federal government. Sometimes they're actually run by federal government employees, but in many more cases, I think it's local communities and nonprofits that take the lead on those.
Thank you. So Maggie just answered a question about legislation. Let me find this question. Are organizations working with regulators in the US and other countries on any legislation that could help with conservation? If so, could we contact our local representatives to encourage them? And then Maggie, who is one of our steering committee members on the Sea Turtle Safe program, did answer that question with a timely example, which is the Sea Turtle Rescue Assistance Act that has just been introduced into Congress here in the US. It's to establish a federal grant program that would provide the needed support to organizations permitted to respond and rehabilitate. She gave the bill number and the link to that, and lots of our organizations are signing on to that. You know, there's a tremendous amount of work happening in the US by zoos and aquariums and other institutions to protect threatened and endangered sea turtles, and there's no federal funding for this federally protected species to do this work for federally protected species. So this is one way that folks can help, is by asking their congressman to sign on to this act. So thank you, Maggie.
Wonderful. Well, we are getting close to our 1 hour time frame here. Once again, I want to really thank Clara and Rod for being participating with us today. We probably will have time for another question or two if folks have them. I just wanted to make sure. I know some people have to leave at 1, and I wanted to make sure that we sort of had a little bit of a closing here. So again, I want to say on behalf of the 16 program partner organizations, so these are mostly aquariums, a couple of zoos that are in the Association of Zoos and Aquariums that are part of our SAFE program. And we, of course, are the ones that are hosting this event today. So thank you very much for signing on to this. I also wanted to mention that obviously people ask us all the time what they can do to help sea turtles. And you've heard some things today in both of our speakers' presentations as well. But certainly you can support efforts that are out there to provide funding for sea turtle conservation work. Rod mentioned the SAFE Small Grants, or the SWOT Small Grants Program, and I wanted to mention that SAFE program has provided support for, I think we're up to over 20 different small grants now as part of the SWOT program. And our grants have been directed specifically to our priority conservation targets, which are the critically endangered Kemp's ridley and Eastern Pacific leatherback. And I want to finish up. We didn't give a very good answer. We didn't have an answer really for the status of the Eastern Pacific leatherback population or what the numbers were. But I do want to share one of the reasons why we focused on that particular species, and actually it's a regional management unit or essentially a subpopulation of that group, is because at least on the nesting beaches, and I'll use Costa Rica as an example, there's been a more than 90% decline in nesting in the last 25 years. And so this species is on a trajectory to be gone in 20 years if we don't make some really critical changes. So that's just an example of why we're so concerned about that species.
Yeah, and I just like to point out that with regard to a couple of those topics you just brought up, Mark, everybody go see that SWOT report, volume 17, that came out today. In the FAQs section of it, toward the back, we answer the question, what can I do to help turtles in my daily life? And we also have a list in the back of all the AZA SAFE sponsored projects through the SWOT grant program. And we are super grateful for that support. As you can see, it's done amazing things over the past 3 years to make a difference in for the groups, both government and local and nonprofit and community that are doing things to help these critically endangered animals.
That's great. And I just have to plug the zoos and aquariums. We are all doing incredible work to save many species around the globe. And, this particular program is focused on sea turtles, and you've heard a little bit about, these two target species, but, visit your zoos and aquariums, your local zoos and aquariums, and do what you can to support those. It's a really easy way to support sea turtle conservation and really, protecting all of water, wildlife, and wild places. All right. Well,
Right. Well, we have hit our 1 p.m. target today. Once again, thanks so much to both of our speakers. We really appreciate their joining us today on World Sea Turtle Day. It's a cool day for all of us. We're all of us that are really into sea turtles are all excited about this coming around every year. And thanks so much to both of you. It's really a pleasure to hear your presentations, and I know we all learned a lot.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And if you want to learn more, you can just go to our websites. Also into the Lautopo network, we have a lot of groups that works on nesting beaches. So if you're more interested, you can go there and check about them and their work.
That was great. I know for those of you that have been paying it, Kelly has put a lot of the links to a lot of this information in the chat. So I hope you've been able to grab those. And again, I want to thank everybody for being here today. And I guess we're done.
Happy World Sea Turtle Day.
Happy World Sea Turtle Day, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.